Here's a thread connecting three very different stories today: the dazzling surface and the shakier substance underneath it. A number, a claim, a headline. Each one impressive on its face, each one hiding a more complicated and more honest reality just below. A case where more of a medicine may actually be worse for you. A stock that exploded 600% for robots that mostly can't do a real job yet. And a jaw-dropping claim about a giant human cousin, built on two old bones pulled from the sea. The lesson is the same. Look past the shiny number to what's actually holding it up. Let's start with something that might be sitting in a medicine cabinet or an IV bag right now. There's a deceptively simple question at the heart of a growing fight in cancer medicine. How much of a drug does a patient actually need? And a striking investigation from KFF Health News, published with CNN, lays out a genuinely unsettling answer. That for a lot of cancer drugs, the standard FDA-approved dose may be higher than necessary, higher than it needs to be to fight the cancer, but high enough to cause more brutal side effects and to cost a great deal more money. Let me explain how this even happens, because the why is the whole story, and it's a fascinating piece of history. For decades, cancer meant chemotherapy, and chemotherapy works on a brutal logic. It's poison that kills fast-dividing cells, and within the limits of what a patient can survive, more poison generally meant more dead cancer cells. So the field built its entire approach to dosing around a concept called the maximum tolerated dose, the MTD. You give as much as the patient can physically endure without unacceptable harm, because more was better. That mindset, more is better, got baked into how cancer drugs are designed and approved, and it made sense for old-school chemo. But here's the problem. Modern cancer drugs are often nothing like old chemo. Many of today's treatments are targeted therapies and immunotherapies, precision tools that block a specific molecular switch or unleash the immune system on a tumor. And for these drugs, the more is better logic frequently breaks down. Once you've given enough of the drug to flip the switch or mobilize the immune system, piling on more doesn't necessarily kill more cancer. It often just adds more toxicity, more misery, without adding benefit. And yet, because the old maximum tolerated dose habit is so deeply ingrained, many of these newer drugs have still been pushed to the highest tolerable dose and approved there. The evidence that this is a real systemic problem is right there in the data. According to work published in the oncology literature, more than 40% of patients in the registrational trials for small molecule cancer drugs required dose reductions or interruptions because the dosing was too aggressive. When 4 in 10 patients in your approval trial can't tolerate the dose you're seeking approval for. That's not a handful of sensitive individuals. That's a signal the dose itself may be set too high. And this isn't just about discomfort, though the discomfort is real and awful. We're talking about people already fighting cancer being made needlessly sicker, in a way that's genuinely staggering. Take one drug mentioned in the reporting, pirtobrutinib. At the standard 200 milligram dose, it costs roughly $25,000 a month. But some researchers argue a much lower dose, 50 milligrams, could be effective for many patients. That lower dose would cost around $8, $400 a month. That's a difference of roughly $17,000 every single month, for potentially the same benefit with fewer side effects. Multiply that across thousands of patients and years of treatment, and you're talking about billions of dollars. And what doctors call financial toxicity, the way the cost of treatment itself can devastate a family on top of the disease. So who's pushing back and what's being done? This is where it gets both encouraging and frustrating. Researchers, notably Mark Rattain at the University of Chicago, have been sounding this alarm for years. And the FDA did respond. In 2021, it launched something called Project Optimus, specifically to reform cancer drug dosing and push companies to actually study lower doses before rushing to approval. And there's real progress. The reporting notes that for 4 recent lung cancer drugs, 2 dosing regimens were each tested, and the lower, less toxic dose was approved in every case. That's the system working. But, and here's my critical read, notice the limits, because they reveal who really holds the power. The FDA's dosing guidelines from 2024 are, in the agency's own description, non-binding. And crucially, once a drug is already approved, the FDA usually cannot compel the manufacturer to go back and run studies on whether a lower dose would work just as well. Think about the incentives there. If you're a drug company, and your drug is already approved and selling at the 200 milligram dose that brings in $25,000 a month, what is your financial incentive to spend millions running a trial that might prove 50 milligrams works fine, and cut your own revenue by 2/3? There basically isn't one. The company that profits from the higher dose is the same company we'd need to voluntarily prove the lower dose is enough. That is a broken incentive at the heart of the system, and it's why patients and independent researchers, not the manufacturers, are the ones driving this. And I want to be careful, because this is not medical advice, and nobody should ever change how they take a prescription based on a news commentary. The point is bigger than any one drug. It's that the approved dose can carry an aura of scientific precision it doesn't always deserve. Sometimes it's a number inherited from a chemotherapy-era assumption that no longer fits the medicine. The people questioning it aren't cranks. They're oncologists and researchers pointing at the data. And the reason the higher dose persists often isn't science. It's inertia and incentives. The dazzling surface is the FDA-approved dose. The substance underneath is more is not always better. And sometimes it's just more expensive and more toxic. When an authoritative number shapes your life, is it built on current evidence or on an old assumption nobody's been given a reason to revisit? And that gap between an impressive number and the shakier reality beneath it takes us from a medical number to a financial one that is truly spectacular. A Chinese company called Unitree made its debut on the Shanghai stock market, and the number was jaw-dropping. Its shares soared as much as 629% on the first day of trading. 629%. The company, officially Yushu Technology, founded in 2016 in Hangzhou by an entrepreneur named Wang Xingxing, is the world's largest maker of humanoid robots by sales. Its IPO raised around $905 million and was oversubscribed more than 8,000 times, a record for Shanghai's tech-focused star market. The company was valued around $66 billion, by any measure an absolute blockbuster. And to be fair, this isn't a company with nothing behind it. That's important to say up front. Unlike a lot of hype-driven startups, Unitree actually makes money. It shipped more than 500 humanoid robots last year and turned a net profit of 278 million yuan in 2025. Its robots have gone viral globally. You may have seen them dancing in perfect sync at China's Lunar New Year Gala, or doing backflips and kung fu moves. And it sits at the center of something real. China now produces around 3/4 of the world's humanoid robots, and this is a genuine front in the technology race between China and the United States. So much so that the US recently moved to ban imports of Chinese-made humanoid robots. And the Pentagon added Unitree to a list of companies it links to the Chinese military. So there is real substance here. Real revenue, real profit, real strategic weight. But now let me get critical, because a 629% first-day pop demands it. Here's the uncomfortable question the stock price is not asking. What can these robots actually do? And the honest answer from the analysts quoted across the coverage is sobering. For now, the vast majority of these humanoid robots are used for demonstrations, performances, and research, not real-world work. They dazzle at galas. They do backflips. What they largely don't do yet is useful, reliable labor in a factory or a home. One detail from Unitree's own earlier filing makes this vivid. Industrial deployments were less than 10% of its sales, with research and education making up the bulk. So this is, to a significant degree, a company whose robots are spectacular performers and not yet at-scale productive workers. And the analysts are strikingly blunt about it. Said the real competitive test will be whether any company, Chinese or American, can achieve reliable performance and attractive returns on investment in large-scale, real-world deployments. That hasn't happened yet. Another analyst from Omdia made an observation that should make any investor pause. Chinese retail buyers tend to be more driven by hype, and the single most honest line came from that same analyst on what he's actually watching for. The first thing I'm seeking an answer for is sort of how real is the demand. That is a remarkable thing to be asking about a company that just hit a $66 billion valuation. And it tells you everything about the gap between the price and the proof. Experts widely agree these bipedal robots are still years away from full-scale deployment, whether on factory floors or in your home. So my take, this is not fake, but it may well be inflated, and those are different things. Unitree is a genuine leader in a genuinely important field. I'm not going to wave it away, and the technology is real. But a 629% single-day surge isn't a measurement of what these robots can do today. It's a bet on a dazzling future that hasn't arrived, supercharged by retail investors caught up in the excitement. History is unkind here. We've seen this pattern with EVs, with dot-coms, with every thrilling technology. The reality often does eventually arrive. But the early stock prices tend to run wildly ahead of it, and a lot of people who bought the dazzling number get hurt in the gap before the substance catches up. The performance is real. Whether the valuation is depends entirely on that unanswered question. How real is the demand? Watch that, not the backflips. And speaking of a spectacular claim that outruns the solid ground beneath it, let me end with a story that's less about money and more about who we are and where we come from. And it has a direct connection to the audience of this channel, because it comes from the seas around Taiwan. Scientists have made a genuinely fascinating claim that the Denisovans, a mysterious extinct branch of the human family tree, cousins to the Neanderthals, included some individuals who were surprisingly, remarkably tall. We're talking about estimated heights around 180 to 190 centimeters, roughly 5 feet 11 to 6 feet 3, which would make them among the largest-bodied members of the entire human family known from the Ice Age, taller than the Neanderthals and Homo erectus, living around the same time, for a group we know so little about. This is a vivid, almost startling new image, not small and archaic, but towering. And here's why it matters to us here, and why it's genuinely exciting. The evidence comes from 2 leg bones, a femur and a tibia, known as Penghu 2 and Penghu 3, that were dredged up from the seafloor of the Penghu Channel, in the Taiwan Strait at depths of 60 to 120 meters. During the Ice Age, when sea levels were far lower, that seabed was dry land, part of the Asian continent. So these are the ancient inhabitants of a drowned landscape right on Taiwan's doorstep. The Denisovans are one of the great mysteries of human origins, first identified only in 2010 from a scrap of finger bone in a Siberian cave, and known mostly from DNA rather than actual fossils. And the technique used here is genuinely cutting edge, because these old bones no longer held usable DNA. Scientists used something called paleoproteomics, analyzing ancient proteins preserved in the bone, to identify them as Denisovan. That's real impressive science, extending the map of these mysterious people to subtropical East Asia. But, and you knew the but was coming, because it's the whole theme today. Let me put on the critical hat, gently, because this is where the dazzling claim meets the shakier ground. And in this case, the scientists themselves are being appropriately cautious. It's the headlines that tend to overreach. Here are the honest caveats. First, this is a preprint. The research was posted on a server called bioRxiv on August 8th, and a preprint has not yet been through peer review, the formal process where independent experts scrutinize the work before it's published in a journal. So this is a serious claim from serious scientists, but it has not yet cleared the bar we'd want before treating it as settled fact. Second, and this is the big one, the entire dramatic image of giant Denisovans rests on 2 bones, a single femur and a single tibia. Scientists estimate the height of whole individuals, which is a well-established technique, but it carries real uncertainty, and 2 individuals cannot tell you about a whole population. Maybe these 2 happen to be unusually tall. You can't know from 2 bones, whether Denisovans were tall or these two Denisovans were tall. Third, and this is a lovely honest detail, the bones were dredged from the seafloor by fishermen, with no precise record of exactly where or in what layer they were found. That missing context makes everything harder to interpret with confidence. So my take, enjoy this, genuinely. It's a wonderful, imagination-firing glimpse of our deep past, and a point of real pride that some of this story is being written from the waters around Taiwan using world-leading science. But hold the specific dramatic claim, Denisovans were giants, loosely, the way the careful scientists do. It's a tantalizing hypothesis resting on two bones and awaiting peer review, not a closed case. And notice this even contradicts a known biological pattern, Bergmann's rule, which predicts that populations in warmer, lower latitude places like Taiwan tend to be smaller, not larger. That contradiction makes the finding more exciting and more in need of scrutiny, not less. The dazzling surface is, ancient giants walked here. The honest substance is, two bones suggest something surprising that we now need to test. Both are true. The second one is just less likely to make a headline. So let me tie all three together, because they're one habit of mind, an approved drug dose that may be higher than the science now supports. A stock price that soared past what the robots can actually do. A claim about ancient giants standing on two bones and a preprint. In every case, there's a bright, confident, headline-ready number or claim on the surface, and underneath, a more tentative, more complicated, more honest reality. And the skill I keep coming back to on this show is the same one every single time. The discipline to not stop at the dazzling surface, to ask the second question, is this dose based on current evidence or old habit? Is this valuation based on what exists or what's hoped for? Is this claim based on a mountain of evidence or two bones from the sea? So here's what I'll leave you with. The world is very good at handing you impressive surfaces, big numbers, bold claims, confident authority, because impressive surfaces grab attention, and attention is what everything competes for now. But the surface is never the whole story, and often it's not even the important part. The important part is underneath, the assumption behind the number, the evidence behind the claim, the incentive behind the recommendation. Learning to look there, reflexively, calmly, without cynicism, but without gullibility either, might be the single most protective habit you can build in a world engineered to dazzle you. Don't be fooled by the shine, and don't be too cynical to appreciate what's real underneath it either. Just look. Take care of each other, and I'll see you next time.